We have made a composition, and now we're ready to get into layers. This first part is going to be just working with layers inside of After Effects, not importing anything yet. So we're going to be working with the layers menu. And as you can see, I go to my layer menu and nothing is available for me. This is because the only thing that I have selected right now is my project window. I don't even have anything selected inside here. Even if I did, if I had my comp here selected, I still get nothing. The only way for me to get any access to the layer menu is by actually having the composition timeline selected. Now, if I go to layer, I have two options, one which is new and another one which is add marker. So obviously any of these other options are only available if I already have a layer established in my comp, which I don't. So I'm going to go to layer new, and here are all of the options I have for different types of layers. You will only be using probably two of these for our intro class. But you can see there are many options. The one that you're going to be using in class is going to be called a solid. So this solid also has a shortcut, Command Y. This is pretty much the only way to get a new layer. Let me just double check and make sure. Look at that. Okay, cool. I figured that this would happen. If you control click in the empty area of your timeline, you will get the new layer pop-up menu. So there that is as well. That's good. I love shortcuts. Anyways, layer new solid gives us the solid settings. The solid settings, you can name your solid if it's, let's say that you're going to start piecing together a rocket ship or something, a person or a robot. It might make sense to name it if you knew that this was going to be the body of the rocket ship or the head of the robot. You could name it that way. Otherwise, if you just leave it, the name will take the name of the color in which you define your solid layer to be. So under size, you have your width and your height. Generally, the width and height are connected to your composition that is currently active, but not always the case. You can set this to be anything you want. I'm going to do mine 200 pixels wide by 200 pixels tall. I'm going to keep my units pixels. My pixel aspect ratio, it's best if you keep this consistent with the composition that you have. My composition I created as an NTSC D1 widescreen square pixel comp. So in order for it to really jive with my composition, I should maintain some consistency in my solid settings as well. So I'm going to leave that square pixels. So here I'm going to get a 200 by 200 pixel square that is going to be gray. There's my color right here. If I wanted my solid to be the size of my composition, oops, get out of there. You can click on this button that says Make Comp Size. And whatever your composition dimensions are, it's going to adopt those dimensions. So I just clicked on it, and now I'm back to 872 by 486. I'm just going to change that back to 200 by 200. And then I'm going to change my color to something I can see better. I'll go with a yellow. Lovely. Alright, and you can see I just chose yellow, and now it changes to yellow solid 1. And when you hit OK, you see changes occurring in all of your palettes. The most noticeable would be the big yellow square in your composition window. There it is. Second place you would probably notice is that in your timeline you now have a layer, and this layer is called Yellow Solid 1. And lastly, you should see that a folder has been created in your project bin called Solids, and if you were to open that up, you'll see that yes, a Yellow Solid 1 has been added to that folder. So After Effects kind of takes charge in the organization process for you. And now every time if I were to create another layer, it's going to pop it right there in that folder. So it's pretty common for you by the time you're done with a project to have a folder called Solids that has a bunch of different elements in it. The cool thing about this folder is that you can reuse elements just by accessing them from the project bin, which we'll get to that later. So first I'm just going to talk about, we're staying simple here, so nothing really fun is going to happen. So if you're expecting fun in this movie, don't get your hopes up. Alright, I'm just going to talk about all these buttons that we see everywhere before we even get into the layer stuff. The composition window, at the bottom of the window, has all of these different buttons and settings and things that you can change. And it's good to figure all this stuff out and really understand it, because there are many useful things down here in the bottom of the window. The first one that we'll talk about is your zoom. And your zoom basically just allows you to zoom in or zoom out. Wow, 1.5%, that's really out there. So it basically allows you to get kind of a bird's eye view of your work. Sometimes you have things that are larger than your canvas and you got to find those edges, so you got to zoom out to see them, or you have you've orchestrated movement of things flying across the screen, or and you gotta have to get zoomed out enough to see where they are and kind of manage them on the past the edges. You can if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, you can scroll up and down just having your mouse or cursor, or if you want to put those two together, your Mercer. Over the window here you can scroll up and down, or if you're on a trackpad that allows multi-touch, this is what I'm doing right now, is just kind of sliding my fingers up and down on my trackpad. It zooms in and out. Fit up to 100% is nice just because it gets you as close to 100% as possible, depending on what kind of room you have for your window here. Alright, then we have this little button here, which is choose your grid and guide options. If you click on that, we have something called title and action safe. If you enable that, it turns on these guides that allow you to see where you might have potential cutoff if you're displaying it on a television set. Either an old tube, NTSC standard definition set, or even some of the nice high definition LCDs that we have now. They basically cut off some of your image. It's called overscanning, and it's good to know where that overscan generally might be, just so that you don't leave any really important information along the edges. Otherwise your viewers probably won't see it. So the outermost line is your action safe, and that just means that anything of absolute critical visual importance should be kept within that line at some point throughout your work. It's not like you can't have things go off the edge or move off screen, whatever. I mean, we see that happen all the time. But if something's going to be on screen and you really want people to see it, it's kind of a reference for you to make sure that you're keeping it somewhere within that zone. And then the inside line is your title safe, and this is set up on this comp. Since I'm on a widescreen comp, it's set up with 3 different title safes. It's giving me a standard def 4:3, you know, like our old televisions that were more sort of square than the widescreen HD TVs that we have now. Basically, if this were to be shown on one of those TVs, I'd want to keep all my text within this inner square. The next one is a widescreen version of that same standard def, and then the third one is widescreen, square pixel, text safe, title safe area. So the general rule is if you're having like directed by so and so or starring Brad Pitt, these are all really important parts of a title sequence that you need to make sure your viewers are going to see. And so you need to know what delivery method you're going to be using for your work. Sometimes you'll have a client say, you know what, I need a SD version and an HD version, so I need a 4:3 and a widescreen. So you might have to do your titles twice, once keeping in mind the region for your inner sort of square zone for the 4:3 SD monitor, and then one other one for the widescreen. But most people just do one, making sure that they're safe within the innermost margins, and then just cut their losses if it's shown on the widescreen. This title and action safe is toggled also by the quote key right next to your return key, so you can hit that on and off. The good thing about this is that it has a center mark, absolute center crosshair, and has your center vertical and horizontal lines, which are great for aligning things. So sometimes you just turn those on. You don't care where title or action safe is. You just want to know where centers are. So it gives you a good quick reference to moving things around and keeping consistent design. You have a proportional grid that you can turn on just for keeping things in line. You have a grid, which gives you tighter measurements or increments. We have guides that you can enable, which you can only get guides up if your rulers are on. So here's your rulers, and you can get a guide by dragging out from one of your ruler edges. So if you grab from the side ruler, you're going to be putting in a vertical guide, and if you drag from your top ruler, you'll be getting a horizontal guide. So this is a way for you to maybe keep things within a certain alignment. So I could turn rulers off and my guides will still be on, or I can turn guides off and they're gone, and this little window popped up. Go away. So those are your grid and guides, your sort of design assistant stuff. Later on we'll get into masks, and masks have edges that could be annoying. You can turn them on or off. Usually you want to leave those on. This is the time code that tells you where you're at in your current time for the timeline in your composition. Right now I'm at frame 0. If you were to click on this thing, you get the go to time window, or you could say, okay, take me to 0200, which is 2 seconds. We need to do 200. That's 2 seconds. And it takes my playhead right to 2 seconds. So right at that moment in time, again, I need something to happen. I need to analyze something that's already happening. You can use that go-to time to do that. I'm just going to go back to frame 0. You can take a picture of your work, and then you can view that picture. You can only take one snapshot, but this is good for, you know, doing a reference. If I had this little guy over here, and I took a picture of it, it just snapped a picture. Now, if I were to have moved it and it's over here, and I'm like, shoot, I want to put it back where it was, or maybe I'm trying to just align something else over there. If I press the show, come on, oh, this trackpad's really fun. Great. Anyways, you can see it flashing. It's really helpful. How nice is that? There we go. All right, there's my snapshot. And now I could say, all right, well, this thing obviously needs to be over here somewhere. Now, where is it in relation to my snapshot? Still a little off. Let's move it up over here. Pretty close. Great. Isn't that dandy? All right, then we have this little pull down here which shows us our channel information. RGB is a composite of red, green, and blue, the 3 pixels that you have in the computer screen environment. If you just want to see the red channel, you can choose that. If you just want to see the green channel, it'll show you that. If you just want to see the blue channel, there's no blue in my yellow square. That's because red and green and additive synthesis environment end up creating yellow. And then alpha shows you the dominant pixels on your screen. This is all stuff that you'll get much later, not very good intro stuff, so let's put it right back to RGB. Resolution. This is how good is After Effects going to draw your pixels on the canvas. It's going to at full resolution, it's going to show you every little detail that you have. It's going to give you your finest picture. At half quality, it's going to render every other pixel, and your slope lines, your curves, any detail in photographs or movies is going to start to get softer, more pixelated. Same with third, it's going to be even chunkier, and you can't really see it, but I'm on quarter now, and I'm seeing that my edges are just really kind of fuzzy. If I were to do something like rotate this thing, there we go. Now we see really chunky edges. Obviously a vertical line or a horizontal line can be drawn pretty well even at a low resolution, but it's these diagonals and the curves that you really start to see an impact of the lowering of resolution. But lowering the resolution is allowing After Effects to not have to think about so much, which is going to let it perform better and faster. So we're going to end up eventually having lots of layers with effects and filters and who knows, with the crazy animation, whatever. And it starts to really slow down After Effects, and for you to actually see anything while you work, you're going to have to change your resolution to a lower resolution. It's very common for me and a lot of the HD stuff that I'm doing to work in a quarter resolution. And it looks like junk, but you know that it's not junk. You're just letting it reference the images for you so that you can get a feel for rhythm, pacing, tempo, the choreography of elements, and so on. But I'll just go back to full because we're just dealing with this awesome little square. Back to full. All right. This little guy here is region of interest, which if you enable region of interest, you can then draw a box basically, and it's only going to render and show you what's inside that box. This is another way for you to focus on something and allow After Effects to not have to worry about everything else. Since it's not drawing everything else outside that box, it's only having to focus on a little bit, which is going to have the same impact as lowering my resolution, giving me a little bit more of an increase in performance out of After Effects while I work. It's handy. I don't use it too often, but it's handy. The transparency grid. If you enable this, it might look very similar to what you see in Photoshop when you have a document that has no background layer. You see through it to the transparency. So I don't have a background layer. You may fool you by seeing black or whatever color your background color might be from making your comp. You remember this, new comp, background color. Alright, so it's basically a reference that can be used to your advantage without having to create a layer, or you can also maintain its transparency. So if you're going to render out a movie that's just titles to give to an editor who's going to overlay them on top of an already existing cut of a movie, then you're going to want to make sure that you do have transparency in your composition, and that you also render it out with transparency, because the default rendering setting is not transparent, and you'll have black burned into your movie. So there's that. Active camera, one view, this stuff's all just too advanced, so we're not going to get through that. Okay, I'm going to wrap this movie up so it's not huge. We'll come back and we'll deal with the layer in the timeline.